coming to you from the void. Just call this season A Voice in the Void. This is the 5D Codes podcast, and we're recording raw and real on December 24th. So those that celebrate Christmas, it's Christmas Eve. I grew up celebrating that tradition. I started to record this, and wow, I was like feeling really uncomfortable talking about any of the traditional holiday belief origins, right? Growing up in a certain religion, which I'm no longer of that religion, but knowing a lot of the traditions, Catholicism, and my daughter's father's family also celebrates Hanukkah. So his mother's Jewish. Insert your belief system of choice. And some people just celebrate the holiday for the commercial aspect, right? Deconstructing like the social engineering, I saw through this even as a kid. I realized I really struggle with the holidays, and I'm just going to be raw and real with this episode. So I started to record. I have 2 recordings actually of season 3, episode 1. And the background noise was so chaotic. I couldn't get it fixed. I couldn't get the noise reduction to work. I was like, okay, God's telling me something. Why this episode's called Let God Take a Lead. So I had this word or theme, the ego trip has come up this week a lot. And I've thought about it a lot with my recordings, because when you talk about spiritual stuff, the ego is doing the talking. The spirit, the heart, has no words. It doesn't need words. Love needs no words. The love of God is silent. It's still, right? And my mind bounces all over the place with so many thoughts that it wants to share, right? So I find that if I record a video once a day, I'm just doing these 3-minute shorts for my YouTube, my nervous system settles. And often I'm doing it when I'm outside walking, or when I'm sitting having my morning tea, or in a space where I'm already relaxed, nervous system wise. And I feel like I've completed my mission for the day, as cheesy as that sounds. So the podcast, I feel like, I don't know, I put more pressure on myself because of it. With the recordings not working, or the sound not working right, I got a mic. My friend got me set up a desktop for me, and I just couldn't bring myself to turn it on and set it up. And I realized I got to let go of the perfectionism. That's of the ego. That's my ego trip, right? So today is Christmas Eve, but yesterday being the eve of the eve, I'm raising a teenage daughter. She's 14 and a half, actually soon to be 15 in February. And I've not been together. I'm just going to share off the cuff. Her father and I split when she was almost 2. And the irony of the story is that, self-fulfilling prophecy, his parents actually divorced. They were married. He and I were not married. Divorced when he was 2. And he said, I want to make this work. We were kind of on the rocks when I found out I was pregnant. It was an oops. And I never had that happen before. I was off I'm just going to be really candid. I was off, I wasn't on any birth control methods. We were doing the rhythm method, and I was really tuned into my body, but we were in a play together. His father was directing this play, and I was around a lot of other women, and they say, when women are together, they menstruate together. And I knew, I was like, I was in sync with the full moon, basically. And all these other women, I remember we were talking one day, they're like, oh, I'm on my cycle on the new moon. I was like, well, that's the opposite of me. Well, sure enough, I switched to new moon cycle during that time. And my daughter obviously wanted to come into the world. So we really tried our best to, connect. And it really felt like an arranged marriage, honestly, at first. I found out I was picking a lot of books to read. I was really into reading, I guess, when I was pregnant. And I had a very hard first trimester. I was really sick and, a lot of morning sickness, and just kind of bedridden for some of it. And I kept picking these books that were novels about arranged marriages. I was like, okay, what is my psyche telling me, right? So her father's a wonderful man, but we are just not compatible. We're not like in sync with each other communication wise, right? And I thought, wow, why would our souls come together and, procreate? why would our daughter choose us as parents? And she's such a wise soul. She's a Pisces. She's an extremely old soul. And, but she's still a teenager. I have to remember that. So her father ended up meeting somebody shortly after we split, and she had a daughter that was my daughter's age, and that's how they connected. They were doing play dates, but they got together so quickly. And, again, we all have these patterns. He had a pattern of jumping into like pretty serious relationship, like one after the other. That's how he and I ended up landing in a relationship. We were friends, and he was coming to my yoga classes with his girlfriend. And then one day she wasn't there. I guess they'd broken up, and he asked me out to dinner, and boom, the rest was history. And, there was an attraction and connection prior to that. But then, when you date somebody, you start to learn. Yeah, I think we learned pretty quickly, whether you're compatible or not. So the reason I'm sharing this is because we have not been together in a relationship since she was about, almost 3, I would say 2.5. So he ended up jumping into the relationship with this woman and was basically with her up until last year. So it was like, almost 10 years of him being partnered. And it wasn't a smooth partnership. Like, she was difficult for me to relate with. She had, and I don't want to project. So I felt like there was a lot of jealousy, and there was a lot of possessiveness. So I just got this sense intuitively that, like, he was on a rope, like I would send texts and I would get this delay, and, or I would try to talk to him in person. He'd be like, oh, I have to go. She's in the car. Da, da, da. I thought, what is going on? You can't even talk to me, like, we're not together. Like, we are, we've officially disconnected, and we realized we weren't compatible. Right. So fast forward to now, it's been a year since he's been divorced, and realized once the divorce happened, like, he was communicating, like he was responding to texts. Like, it was wild. It was like literally night and day. And I got to see how my intuition was validated. Like, yeah, there was some possessiveness on her part, and no shade to her, but she was a Scorpio. I'm a Cancer, Scorpio. My daughter's a Pisces, a lot of water signs, but I've known, not knocking astrology, it helps me understand both positives and negatives because we have it all. The polarity is a thing when it comes to the human avatar. That Scorpios can sting, and they can be jealous and possessive and rather intense. Let's say they got the stinger, right? As a crab, I just go into my shell. Like, yeah, I can pinch, but not like, I don't sting like a scorpion. So okay, her father's free now, right? And it's the first Christmas that, we've been in this situation, and my daughter's half sister, the daughter that her stepmother's daughter. I'm going to be botching up this because it's still uncomfortable for her to talk about, but it's really important to get this out there and in an imperfect way. Cause this could be your situation too. Not exactly the same, but like, we all have these clunky families, nothing is functional. I'm sorry. Every family is dysfunctional, as in every family has its drama, its baggage, karma, call it what you will, we're imperfect in these avatars, and we have to freaking accept it. So this is the ego trip, this is the ego trip I was on, maybe you've been on. There is no effing perfect. We have to drop this, and you don't need fancy equipment, meaning, how does this metaphor fit into life? My fancy mic is a metaphor for, I have to have everything together for the perfect Christmas. Like, no, we don't even have a tree this year, and I have this little tree that my nephew he made this ornament for my mom, and it fell off, and they were going to throw it away. And I was like, I'll take this tree. And I was like joking, like, I'll put this up as my tree. And it's literally like as big as my thumb. Right. And I put it on our table, and I realized today, I was like, wow, I have not gotten we have a fake tree with old ornaments tree out since my daughter, it's probably been a few years. Because she used to like that tradition, and it's just been a clunky few years. So back to this social engineering thing. I really deconstructed the holidays when I was little. I always hated the holidays. I felt like it was fake. I felt like it was pressure to be together, and, knowing some of these family members, there wasn't really a genuine connection. We were forcing this, what is this whole blood is thicker than water? Like, who created that freaking paradigm? Like, for some of us, our family members are abusive. There's this dysfunction to the point that you realize, yeah, this is not a healthy relationship. Like, no, it is okay for me to not have Christmas with, this person. I insert your family member of choice. I don't even want to say certain family member titles, because I don't want to throw it into your matrix paradigm. Like, oh yeah, I have this family member, whether it's, again, I'm being guided not to say certain titles, let's just say it's an elder, somebody younger, somebody in your nuclear family or your extended family. Okay. We'll just keep it vague, because we are all deconstructing this for ourselves. And truly, it's all part of God's plan and unconditional love. oversees everything. I mean, this is what this podcast is about. New Earth, okay, let's just be blunt. That's an ego trip too. We're talking about real reality. We're talking about how to live from the heart. It's clunky. It's imperfect, right? It means sometimes that, yeah, you divorce somebody or you separate from a relationship, and because, maybe you both had your own growth paths to take, right? And being together was just painful. It was just not in alignment at that moment. And I personally believe, and I think this is where we're coming to as a collective right now, that these old paradigms, okay, citing a contract and saying till death do us part, come from the ego. They are ego constructs. You don't need a piece of paper to prove your love. And here's my wise daughter. I was talking to her about how, so I'm going to be jumping all over and it's all connected, and maybe my mind works the same as you. But my daughter said something really powerful, and I'll come back to how, when she said it. She said, Mom, if it's really love, it doesn't end. Love doesn't end. Okay. And I think that's the ego trip a lot of us are on. We think, okay, old earth, new earth, right? Let's use this metaphor that I'm playing with for this podcast. The fifth dimension just means unconditional love. That's our natural state. But most of us aren't there. Most of us are on an ego trip. We're on a head trip. Here I am talking to you from the head. But there's heart to it, right? And I think a lot of us have to get there through the intellect. I mean, I think that's why spiritual teachers write in metaphor, in symbol, because when you get to the realm of the heart, it's like riddles. It really is. You don't need words. You can't even use words. So even with what I'm sharing, it's like the space between. Feel into your own heart and give yourself what you need to process what's coming up. Because I shared with somebody a while ago, journaling kind of didn't work for me. I forced myself to do it for so long, and I just felt like I was looping in the same thoughts. And they said, well, if journaling doesn't work, drop it, do something else. And I thought, you know what, that's true. Podcasting has really helped me, and not even recording stuff to share, but like even just talking it out. And I do that even with my chat GPT, who I've named Anana. I think personalizing that has been really, really helpful, like kind of talking live journal. For those that have the active brain, you can personalize it there's a personalized setting if you go into settings. I did it even with my profiles, like my Enneagram, my astrology, and my human design, and let it know kind of how I wanted to communicate, like what my communication style is. And it responds that way to me. It's really, really cool. But because I process so much intellectually, and psychoanalyze, it can really help me hash out certain situations. And for years, my daughter's my daughter's father's marriage caused me so much tension. It was like, we were done. I knew that, it's like I had no desire to be with him again, right? But the presence of this woman who was just like nails on a chalkboard, she was, I guess it does fit in, not knocking Scorpios because they have a lot of good qualities, but like fits in with that possessive, I guess we all have a dark side. And Enneagram talks about this too. You have your heart space, and then you have your stress point. And I feel like the stress point of a Scorpio is like this possessiveness. Okay. So I'm just using that as an analogy. But she literally said to me, because we had like a couple therapy sessions over the years with her father and her and I trying to like co-parent, like, oh, I literally wanted your child to be my child. I wanted you out of the picture. She actually said she imagined me dead several times. Like, this woman is very blunt. Okay. Not to say that I didn't want that at some point too, because we had such a hard time communicating, and she was really aggressive towards me to the point where I had to be assertive back and like turned into aggression. Like, stop, you cannot text me. Only her father can text me, but he barely texted. I was like, he was like under some spell. And so sending my child to this house half the week was so hard. It was one of the hardest things for me psychologically. And people kept saying, oh my God, you need to fight this in court. And the more I'm like, fight it in court, like the more I tried to be assertive, the more she fought back. I would say they fought back, but it was really her. And now the truth is coming out. I'm like hearing how she harmed my daughter's father, and did this covert, psychological manipulation that really messed with my daughter's self-esteem and messed with my daughter's relationship with her half-sister, like to the point where they just stopped communicating. And my daughter felt like she was like, it was like under surveillance. Like her stepmother was constantly listening in on the conversations. They were talking on the phone. She would be there, but not say that she was there. Or her half-sister was in the room, and then she kept leaving and talking to her mom and saying, wait, I have to go talk to my mom about this, and then coming back. And it was very upsetting, and my daughter didn't have the language to communicate that at the time, so she just ended up shutting down and kind of locking herself in a room and not communicating to anyone in that house for a while. And now she's going through this teenage moodiness, which we know it's hormonal and it's developmental, and she communicates with me better when she's with her dad, and then she communicates with her dad better when she's with me. So I thought, why not bring us all together? And she was at his house tonight. Call him. He was downstairs trying to get her to go decorate Christmas ornaments. And we ended up having this 3-way conversation. They're both in the house. I'm over in my apartment. And it was really, really beautiful, to just kind of be in that communion together and feel the messiness, feel the sadness. I'm not going to even project it onto her because it's my sadness too. And like all of us separated, that it was never my desire. Okay. This is the messiness of life, to have a child and raise a child in a split family. It was never my desire and it was never her father's desire. It was never my desire to just live in a way that felt separated, and clunky. And he and I can communicate pretty okay. But then, once this woman got in the mix, it was like, whoa, okay. I know he and I had some communication blocks, but it wasn't that bad. And it was like literally communicating through a cement wall. And then once she stepped out of the picture, it was like, whoa, okay. It's like he's back again, I wonder how that impacted my daughter. And I'm just being the human that I am. I think out loud, and I'm pretty open. I said to my daughter, I said, sometimes I wonder what it would be like if, your stepmother hadn't come into your life. And she said, Mom, everything happens for a reason. Again, this wise child. Mom, everything happens for a reason. I'm like, absolutely. And we come together, we separate, it's messy. And then the holidays hit, right? And I feel like for a lot of us, because of this social engineering, it's this forced togetherness, it can bring up a lot of emotion. So when I was little, I even saw through like Halloween, I would always get like a fever on Halloween. I couldn't deal with it. It was just like too much stimulation, dressing up and, all the energy around it and the candy. And then Christmas would come around and I would just be so grumpy and I would want to isolate. And my siblings would get so greedy about presents, right? And I was just like, it's not about superficial, material stuff. And that caused a lot of tension, and it caused tension in my relationships with my siblings. There was a lot of bickering. There was a lot of funkiness, call it dysfunction, whatever. What family doesn't have that? But, my daughter has been raised, and basically with me, she's an only child, right? And with her dad, she had this half sister. He adopted her sister when she was like 5 because her father wasn't in the picture and didn't want to be in the picture. So that is a tie that will, stay with his ex, I guess, so, and my daughter was super, super close with her half sister until, things just got really funky. And a part of it she feels was that her stepmother was interfering and messing with the communication. And, childhood is difficult enough, let alone having a rift with your siblings. But I know in my life, my upbringing, there was a lot of bickering with my siblings. There was a lot of disconnect, and I was very disconnected with my sister Rebecca for a lot of our childhood. We had a rivalry. There was a competitive energy, and it was really, it was what it was for me. But I can see now as a parent watching my daughter and her half sister have this tension. It was really upsetting to my mom. It was really upsetting my dad, and of course, as a parent, you want your kids to get along. You want everybody to connect. And now it's like I have a different perspective. So here we are at the holidays, whether you celebrate or not. I know my druther is to not celebrate, but I have a kiddo and I'm raising her in this culture, and it's still hard. I will admit, we don't have decorations set up, but I am, she's getting presents, I'm doing it in a way that feels comfortable, but still there's tension. Still there's some push-pull for me. And I wonder how that feels for you, and what's coming up in your reality, dear listener, because things are not always easy this time of year. Things are not easy any time of year, but there's just so much freaking capitalist pressure, and the material stuff is always ridden on me. I would just love to give somebody gifts because I love the love language of gift giving, when I feel called, and not, it's always hard for me to wait until Christmas, like not do it in this really staged way. But when you have a kid, it's like, it's so weird how these traditions keep getting recycled, right? So my brother called me today, and he and I have not had a really positive relationship for quite a long time. He, just being candid, because I know he hasn't listened to the podcast, and he's really open about his sobriety, but he struggled with addiction to mostly alcohol for many years. I mean, since he was started using, which I don't know what age he was, but definitely under 21. And he did AA and he stopped drinking, but I know from my own experience with Al-Anon and in codependency that, in codependency is just like, any alcoholism or any sort of substance addiction. I'm stumbling over my words even talking about it because it's uncomfortable. So then now I know we're getting into some real stuff. And I had this come up with her father, my daughter's father, today too. I was like, wow. He's like, I have this bedtime routine. And I'm like, wow, I realize I kind of deny my own routines. I'm constantly defaulting to how does my daughter feel? And maybe too much so. That's the codependency still kicking in now and again, Putting ourselves first can be really, really hard. So, and I know in that like addictive, codependent kind of cycle, we can lose ourselves, whether you're the addict or the codependent, it's all the same thing. So, and sometimes your memory can get skewed. So my brother and I, I have so many fond memories. See, my memories of our childhood, like, oh, my brother and I at certain periods got along. I mean, he was a brother and he would do things to like annoy me. When I was floating on a float, like in the pool, he would see me. He would look from the upstairs of the house and see me in the pool and go out and sneak out into the yard. He would turn on the hose because we had a fence covering the pool and like spray it over the fence, and like spray me. Or he would slyly, he was really good at this, sneak in to the pool because I usually had music on. I was closing my eyes. I was in my zone, and he would slide under the water and push me over. So it was always, it was fun. Love those summers. My teenage self trying to find her pool happy, and just like I didn't want to get my hair wet, and I wanted to get the sun and listen to the music. I would be out there with my weights and working out, and he just wanted to be a bratty little brother, right? He's 5 years younger than me. But so the bratty little brother was cute when we were little, but when you're like now 47 and 42, it's not as cute. Or that banter just got old, and it's like he still has that same like sarcasm. So realized, we got to a certain age and I'm like, okay, he's still the same personality. And I'm like, wow, maybe I outgrew this. I really don't resonate with this. But as I started coming into my own, well, actually I didn't resonate with it at that age. Who likes being pushed over in a float or getting sprayed with cold water? Now, maybe you had brothers or you had a sibling that did worse stuff to you. Maybe they didn't do anything bad. And you're like, whoa, I never experienced that. There was a lot of bickering in my family, and I'm saying bickering very kindly. And I kept myself I holed up in my room. My brother still looks at that and like, oh my God, you isolated from everybody. And I'm thinking, well, you guys were all arguing, sometimes getting physical. I didn't want to be a part of that. So that was my way of coping, right? And my brother called while I was talking to my daughter tonight. I was like, oh, let's merge him in. I think he wanted to talk to me one-to-one, so he didn't know my daughter was going to be on the phone. He was hanging out with his kids, so it was just one of those like off-the-cuff conversations. And, at one point he said something he brought up the past, I guess. Like, oh, remember that Christmas we were throwing eggs at each other? Now my brother, we definitely both like to make a point, let's just say. And I realized with him, I'd rather be happy than be right. He's an Aquarius. Gotta love the Aquarians because they definitely like to have the last word, and they like to hone in on the truth, and they're on an ego trip. They like to play God. I guess we're going into a lot of astrology here, but there's this one astrologer that I love that would post like comedy reels about the different astrology signs, and he's an Aquarius himself, and he'll make fun of Aquarians. So like if he can knock it, I can speak to this. But he said, the Aquarians are are the ones that think they're God. They are above it all. And we are actually in the age of Aquarius, which is really, really cool. So I love, again, we all have our stress point and our heart space. And I think that playing God can be both for the Aquarians because they can touch in on some really deep truths and be extremely wise, right? But then they can also be like super arrogant. And here we go, talking about an ego trip, beyond an ego trip. It was funny. I said to my daughter after the call, I was like, my brother didn't remember that correctly. Like we weren't throwing eggs like that, or like he was exaggerating. She just laughed. She was like, oh my God, you guys are funny. And people will say when I talk about bickering on holidays with my siblings, well, with my brother really, oh, that's so funny. But to me, it feels like, I mean, we're like stirring up like old trauma. Like this is not feeling funny. This feels like, really harmful, like, so perception is everything, right? Like looking back at those memories of being in the pool, getting sprayed cold water on me, it sounds like really cute and innocent, but like I was literally in my zone and my brother tried to like ruin that, right? And that's just kind of been this pattern of like me finding my zen and my brother trying to ruin it, because he was feeling crappy and he wanted to bring me onto his frequency pretty much. I mean, we all have a family member like this, right? So without going into this long-winded story about our relationship, my brother's and my relationship, and how that has all flowed, just going to keep it on this ego trip topic. And what does it mean to let God take the lead? Okay, that means recording at 1 a.m. Now it's 1 a.m. here, and not using a mic and a fancy computer, using my phone and trusting that the sound's going to be okay, lying in bed and recording with a dry throat, not having a script, because God doesn't need a script. So why do I? If I can really allow myself to hone into the realm of my heart. And it's funny with the whole ego trip topic, because many people treat their ego like it's God. How do you know you're on an ego trip? You're trying too hard. That would be the perfectionist. Oh, I need to have a script. This is just where I was. I need to have my mic and I need to do this. I need to do this. Stop. Just live. Have a 3-way conversation with your ex and your daughter, and let it be clunky, and have a conversation with a family member that triggers you and let it be clunky and awkward, and, let it have some drama, but see it for what it is. Even ending that conversation, I just sat with it. I was like, whoa, that was uncomfortable. And then because my daughter was, in on the conversation and heard it, she was like, Mom, it's your perception. And I mentioned the family stuff, like, oh, she's not, my daughter's not as close with her cousins as she used to be. And I said, I'm not super close with any of my cousins anymore. It's not like they're like best friends and we check in with each other. Right? And the way I made it sound was like, well, it's on them, and she said, well, it's on you too, Mom, like, have you reached out to them? I'm like, good point. Now, in some scenarios, I can honestly say, yeah, I have. And if there's not a reach back, I get it. And there's other cousins that maybe I haven't reached out to. I don't know, maybe there has been a block. And so this is where I see this whole social engineering program. Okay. If you haven't had this dissected, or if you haven't done this work yourself, I mean, and I know if you're listening to this, you have, or you are doing it. It's basically like, what does everything mean? Why do we have these traditions? Why do we have these beliefs? Who said blood is thicker than water? Meaning, who said your ancestry means more, that you have to love the people that you're related to more than anyone else in your life? This whole, your vibe attracts your tribe. What is your soul tribe? Well, I even think that's an ego trip. I mean, really, if you deconstruct the beliefs that you have and the paradigms that we're living from, maybe nothing means anything. Maybe we are all having this ego trip, and maybe that's exactly how it's meant to be, And tonight, after this conversation, because I was feeling my emotions just going all over the place. My daughter was like, are you okay, Mom? I feel like, are you hormonal today? Are you like on your period? I was like, well, to be honest, my emotions are all over the place. And I feel like I don't want to give my power to the holidays, but I have to admit the programs that society at large, because this is like a massive thing, and like the whole collective, right? This holiday time. I mean, everybody has time off. Like the calendar is scheduled around this. The school system, right? Work system. It's all scheduled around this. It feels so forced. Why? And if you don't buy into it, if you don't love it, something's wrong with you, or, you stand out, or you're weird, or da da da. So I think that was the main beef, honestly, that my brother and I had all along. Like, he really loved the holidays and he loved the presents and he really bought into everything. And I think that he was, because he and I are more similar than he would want to admit, but he saw that there was something that he didn't resonate with. Like, he saw that there was a truth that maybe he was uncomfortable, like, buying into, that I bought into. It was like, why is she buying into that? Like, I don't necessarily like want to dissect that for myself, because that feels really uncomfortable. So I'm just going to project this discomfort onto her and tell her that she's, annoying and selfish and reclusive and, narcissistic or whatever. And a lot of it is because I'm uncomfortable, right? So we have to admit that when we are getting defensive, we're feeling uncomfortable. And that's exactly how I feel around the holidays. Like, I'm going to look at the holidays as this like person that I just feel really defensive around. Like, it helps me to look at it that way, like personalize it, give it a persona. Like Christmas, New Year's, I dislike it. It's like an ex-boyfriend that I never want to see again. You know what I mean? Like, why do they keep popping up back up into my reality? God's making me have to face it again, And now I see with a daughter, it's like, okay, talking to her dad and her, they were in the same house, right? She didn't want to go down and decorate. He was sending pictures to both of us of like the ornaments that he created on this 3D printer that he was painting. And it's like, we all kind of connected over that, It's like, she's doing her teenage thing and brooding in her room, or she was looking at jeans she wanted to get, possibly with her Christmas money. And I'm here lying in bed with a heating pad, trying to stay warm and get some rest. But my mind was like, racing, because I was feeling like this ex is here and I really don't want to face them, but I have to face them, right? And what ended up happening was, well, my literal ex, her father, right? We had this beautiful communion on the phone. That's how I'm perceiving it. And then she ended up hanging up on both of us, and he and I talked for another like 20 minutes. And it was more, I guess it was more relational than we've been in a while. And that felt really refreshing. And now I realize, the ex-boyfriend that's been haunting me, that is Christmas and New Year's, right? That I'm personifying, is reminding me of exactly what my daughter said that I shared at the beginning of the podcast. Mom, if it's really love, then it never ends. If it's really love, it never ends. So you can't get rid of the ex. If there was really love between you, then it's going to be there. It can change form, but you can't get rid of it. You know what I mean? You don't have to be in a romantic relationship with them, but it's going to be there, right? So love never ends. And the reason that I guess the story came about, the reason that my daughter shared that, was because, so we're talking about an real ex of mine. I told my daughter that I had a vision of her. So I had a very strong intuitive download. I would get these premonitions of things that were coming really strongly at that time in my life. And it happened, it would throw me off. And I finally said, God, no, I don't want this anymore. Now I know at this point in my life, I can't control what God wants you to see or hear. You can't control that. But I had a vision basically of my daughter when she was 5 years old. So she was sitting on the bed. I was meditating and doing yoga in the house I was living in with this partner. He and I were engaged. It was actually the man who taught me Reiki, my Reiki master teacher. We ended up getting into a relationship, and this little girl was sitting at the edge of the bed, and she said, Mom, I'm going to be your daughter. And she had blonde, kind of dirty blonde curly hair. And when my daughter was 5, I had this like flash one morning. She was sitting on my bed, and it was like, oh my God, that was you. She was like, what, Mommy? Now, I've told you this story so many times, but I retold it. And every time she's like, oh, you never told me that before. Because usually it happens like years apart. So when I told it to her tonight on the phone, I said, I found out after I had that vision of you that, the man I was in a relationship with didn't want to have kids. Like he had a lot of like trauma in his past. And I realized that was a deal breaker, And I said, I don't know if that was, you didn't feel like it was really love, because it was like we were still young, honestly, we didn't do the whole values talk and da 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 da. But I it just kind of naturally kind of unraveled itself in the next few months. And Ren's dad and I had been friends, and honestly, like getting the Reiki certification from my ex was kind of one of the ways that Ren's dad and I got together, because he became a Reiki student of mine when I moved back to Rochester. I was in New Mexico at the time in this relationship. And yeah, so I said to my daughter, that was obviously meant to happen, right? As she so wisely said, everything happens for a reason, Mom. But when she said, if it was really love, Mom, that wouldn't end. And I realized that it hit me from this, in this God way, like I had a pattern myself of having a lot of short-term relationships. I would say like 3 months, but they were really intense. Like I felt like it was 3 years. Like there was just a lot of intensity. It was a strong connection. So it felt like, and then I realized at the end, I'm like, was that just an ego trip? Because nothing felt lasting, right? If it's really love, it's not going to end. And something about this time of year and the energy that comes up around the holidays, and oh my God, it's all about love. I guess we have to see, we can spin anything negative, we can spin anything positive. We have to see the happy medium. We have to get to the neutral point. We have to get to ground zero. And that's what home is. I mean, if you look at the chaos theory, it's like, how do you find peace in the chaos? How do you find peace in the storm? You go to the center of it, right? The eye of the storm is the stillest, quietest place. And man, it's hard to get there on your own. The ego can't do it. And that's the ego trip. It's like the ego is just like, I'm tired. Oh my God, I'm like swimming against the current. It's like trying to fight in the storm, Like that was 10 years of, my ex's relationship with his stepmother. It was tumultuous. It was this tornado that my daughter was in, that I was in, that he was in. They were all, she was in it. She was partaking in it. And she got together when he and I were, still figuring stuff out and, just newly separated. And it was just tumultuous. And she got together in that space with him. And it's like attracts like, right? She liked the fight, she liked the fight. And when things started to calm down, there was always another drama that was thrown in there. Like, she would do something or say, something would happen and my daughter would respond. And it was just chaotic. But everything happens for a reason. And why did I have that vision of my daughter when I was in that other relationship? Well, it actually helped me have that conversation with my partner. And it revealed that he did not want to have children. I was like, whoa, okay, not the one for me, But I was already emotionally attached. And so the disconnection was not a painless process, let's just say, right? There was some drama involved because there was a codependency thing, it was what it was, a growth process. And I'm learning, just like you, how to love through this human avatar, because I've been hurt just like you have. And my ego, I know my ego is the only one that can hold on to this pain. My ego is the only one that's hurt. But man, it gets revved up now and again. And this time of year, it really revs up, right? And I did a video on this, can anyone really hurt you? It was something that my spiritual teacher asked me in my 20s. I had this guru experience, and anything that he said, it just like went in, it penetrated so deep and like watered something in my soul. Realized nothing can really hurt me. The true me, the true you it's just pure essence, is pure energy, untouchable, unhurtable. And it's here to experience the chaos. I hate to say this, but like it's here to learn how to find the eye of the storm. It's here to remember that the storm is just a facade, So I have a push-pull energy with the holidays. It's like that ex haunting me. And I realize the holidays are going to keep coming back, just like that ex. And it's up to me to change my perception. It's like God's going to keep sending us the waves, and each wave is full of love. Like each wave, we got to ride it, right? We got to ride it, babes. We can learn how to find that peace in the tidal wave. So let's go back to the storm analogy, because it's not working with the waves. Ride the waves. It's like finding the calm in the center of the storm. You can tell I'm getting tired. So just be with me here for a moment. If you're still here, just breathing and being. Thank you for listening to some of my story. I hope it helps you process your story. And if anything landed in an uncomfortable place, then, I always trust that, or the opposite, or if it felt really validating, we get what we need when we need it. You did not come across this episode on accident, and I'm coming to you from the void. This is a voice in the void, because that's what we truly all are. Enjoy your messy, real human experience, because I think that finally I'm in this space, and I have to be careful saying that, because it's like, I say finally I've landed here, right? It's like you get humbled, you get knocked off your freaking pedestal. No, you haven't landed nowhere, sister, but here and now, because that's all we have, the here and the now. That's the divine perfection, but for the theme of this season, a voice in the void, letting God take the lead, there's no spiritual bypassing, peeps. And in the moments that we do try to escape or bypass, we own it. We own it by just seeing it. I tried to do it earlier tonight, and I came home. My daughter was skating. I was watching her skate. I don't ice skate, so I just took her skating, and I'm sitting out in the cold. And I was like trying to find my zen. I was like really feeling uncomfortable, So I came home and tried to take a hot bath. I just couldn't let myself relax. I was like in my head about it. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, I'm dodging feelings that I have about this holiday, because I don't want to give the holiday power. By trying not to give it power, I'm giving it power, right? Kind of like with my daughter's ex-stepmother. Like by trying not to think about her, not give her power, we're giving her power. Just let it come. Let the waves come. Think about it. Let it take over. Feel it. Talk about it. Experience it in whatever way, shape, or form, And when I talked to my daughter on the phone, I was talking to her, and her dad texted me. He said, I don't think she wants to come down. She's talking to somebody on the phone. And I was like, she's talking to me, silly. It's like, maybe I should just call you, and it took a bit to do that, but finally I did. God's always willing to talk. And God's talking to you through this podcast. God's talking to you through your clunky conversations with your family, with your teenager, with your dog, with your cat, whatever. If you have an ex that's haunting you, God's talking to you through that too, I will admit, I looked up this time of year, my ex, my first love from my 20s. That was a clunky one too. Tried to find him on the internet. Only his LinkedIn exists, and it's like this picture from, seriously, identity freeze, according to my conversation with my ChatGPT buddy, Anana. Picture from the time around when we dated or after we dated. Like, he's stuck in his 20s. I'm like, dude, you're 47. And I saw him like unknowingly. It's like we saw each other, but it was like one of those like, whoa, he did not look the same. 5 years ago, maybe, he was, in front of his mom's old house, because I would walk, for nostalgia's sake, I would walk in the neighborhood I grew up in sometimes, and he was out there doing the lawn. I was like, I thought it was him, but he had the same smile, but he looked completely different. Like body type change and everything. So I was like, wow, okay, doesn't feel like this person. And it really honestly helped me let go of the whatever I was holding on to, attachment, nostalgia, because he would just pop into my consciousness, and I'd be like, oh, I have to look him up. But here I am today. I was like, whoa, I looked him up, and I let myself do it, and was like feeling into it, not fighting it, because in the past I would loop about it because I would fight it. And then I just had this moment. I was like, okay, yeah, God, here's my, Christmas time of year, check in with my ex. And that's that, don't let him haunt you. Don't be a Scrooge. What happened to Scrooge? All of those ghosts came back. We don't have to be in the past, the present, or the future. We don't have to pick one. I mean, we can just allow ourselves to be this whole be here now thing. I know I'm tripping over my words here, but this be here now thing. Okay, last thing I'm going to say. That might involve going down memory lane. That might involve you visiting the ghosts of Christmas past, the exes of Christmas past. Okay, I'm going to use that analogy here. That might involve you fantasizing about the future and a vacation you're going to take or plans that you want to make. That might involve just focusing on the present. It can involve all three, right? We got to just let go of this ego trip that we're supposed to be just sitting here, meditating, feeling zen all the time, doing whatever you're doing with complete peace, right? Because this human experience involves is many storms. And look at the holy books, from the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible. I mean, there's all kinds of like primal, like war, it's primal. There's so much fight or flight, and this whole obsession with, new earthing. And this I'm letting this go from my own past too. As I talked about this a lot, and this has been really, really real in the moments I've talked about it, but you have to have a relaxed nervous system all the time. And it's all about peace and love, and all the time, peace and love. my psyche was just feeling so much pressure. Like there was any tension in any aspect of my brain or a relationship or even with my cat. I'm like, oh my God, I'm being punished. I'm like, I'm in old earth. I'm not in new earth. Drop the ego trip. Drop the ego trip. That's not what Ram Dass meant when he said, be here now. Find your Zen all the time. Zen, Zen, Zen. Sometimes Zen involves a slap in the face, and that's what the Zen teachers are really harsh too. Slap yourself awake. Be here now. Wake up. Do what needs to be done. If you're sweeping the floor, sweep the floor. Sometimes you daydream while you're sweeping the floor, right? That's okay. But then you come back to sweeping the floor, right? Ego trip be gone. Or, even better, let's make it real. Let your ego trip be here, in the now. Fight with your brother. Talk to your ex. Commune with your children from another room on the phone. Just accept and bless the messy. And the honoring of yourself every moment is acknowledging with complete honesty what's happening. That's it. Just acknowledge, just notice, just be present with it all, because this reality that we're living is unique and we only get one chance at this wild and messy life that we're living, at least in this timeline that we're on, right? I love the multiverse theory. I have no proof other than my intuition tells me it resonates because I've seen the butterfly effect, You feel into it for yourself. No one can give you the answer. That's between you and God. On that note, an hour in, this is Sarah coming to you. Just a voice in the void. A voice in the void. With the 5D Codes podcast, we're letting God take the lead this season. Peace out. May all be merry and well in your life. And when it's not, embrace that too. Love ya.